Ladies and gentlemen, I have here for you a cast of Neblime against Mystery Meat. Mystery Meat in this particular matchup is going to be Zerg. I believe he plays Terran later on. He might have been rolling random. Meanwhile, Neblime is going to be Zerg as well. He's trying to be Zerg in general. Neblime is Zerg here. Let's go ahead and set up our camera hotkeys so that we have F1 for Neblime and F2 for Mystery Meat's main. I'm going to try to get into the habit of doing that, and I'm also getting in the habit, or continuing the habit, of sipping coffee during castovers. I wonder what that could mean. Now, let's see what the openers are going to be. This is right after, chronologically speaking, in terms of balance changes, is right after reducing the movement speed of the Gorgor. And so, with the heavy gas investment by Neblime, I suspect this will end up being a Zorkiz, but at the same time, there's a decent amount of money here, so for both of our players have a reasonable amount of minerals. Who knows what's going to come of this? There's a little bit more gas harvesting going on for Neblime than there is for Mr. Me. You can tell that that third worker is helping him out a little bit, although if it was tasked onto the geyser, I think he'd have slightly better efficiency, but it's not too much of a difference. It's actually going to be a Kagrant first, and I suppose this is in a prime position to become a Spraith, and that's probably just because Mystery Meat had a decent amount of money anyway, and he'll go for a Hydrock opener versus the Zorkiz opener of Neblime. This is going to be a really good test because in the past it was reported to me that players of relatively even skill, which I would say, for example, Shambler and Mystery Meat going at it in ZVZ, but I think Neblime and Shambler have also done this, and maybe even Neblime and Mystery Meat had done this prior. Basically, it devolved into Gorgor versus Gorgor, and just due to how things worked out with the units and such. But at the very least, obviously, Gorgors themselves will not really be any different now that they move a little bit slower and attack a little bit slower, and, you know, I think there was one other balance change that I made to them, but most recently we adjusted their movement speed. So as a result of that, I suspect that, you know, fighting Gorgors with Gorgors won't really be all that different. But at the same time, it looks like Mr. Me was actually trying to build a Kagrant there or something, because I saw the shadow disappear, and that usually only happens when the Droleth is trying to build something. But at the same time, yeah, okay, we've got Gorgs. Presumably one of these is, yeah, indeed, there is a Gorgor on the way. Yeah, that's something to think about, right? So what are you going to realistically do about that? It's going to be a Spraith and a Hydra. If it was Gorg v Gorg, I don't think much would change. In terms of the fights, like, I guess they'd, you know, positioning would matter a little bit more because of the speed being slow. And then if it's versus, you know, Hydras, well, suddenly you can move, you know, backwards a little bit easier. You've got more breathing room between attacks and more breathing room between, you know, the Gorgor actually hitting your units and such. The splash is still going to be there. And this is a case where, like, you have to really watch out for the workers. Although Splash will always hit burrowed units, so you don't even get a chance to, like, burrow away. You definitely have to pull them. That's another thing to keep in mind. This Droleth is going to go ahead and rescout. It will see a Gorgor here. So that is going to be useful information. I believe Mystery Meat was indeed paying attention to that. He's got a couple of Hydras, actually a pair of 3, as well as his Larvosk finishing up here. And this Droleth is going to just go ahead and stand Burrow Guard for the purposes of tracking, you know, whether or not the... Yeah, he's actually going to be able to spy that because that does have enough vision when burrowed to see that Gorgor. And now this one is going to start to get pushed back as well. So I don't think that, you know, considering the fact that you can actually give chase a little bit, obviously not over terrain and such, it is going to be in a good position here to riposte this attack. It seems like Neblime is going to be continuing the force. And if you're wondering, by the way, the birth animation I just have to remake for an egg, because I only ever made it for a cocoon, since it used to be a mutation of the Mutalisk way back when. That's some interesting trivia for you. But eventually we're just going to have a remodel, and so I'm kind of just thinking, oh, that'll happen just before the birth animation happens. Maybe it would still be worth it for, I guess, other modders who are using that rip or something to use that. But anyhow, we have a whole squadron here, a fleet of 4 Gorgors. It's not really a very large fleet, but there's a lot of Hydras coming out as well. So I do think that alone is going to be... there's going to be parity here, right? The Spraith will get consistent damage dealt. The workers need to be very, very careful here. You're going to see a whole bunch of them get popped, and that's going to be pretty significant because Neblime already had more workers anyway. These Hydras on the left weren't even really attacking, and so this is looking pretty good for Neblime. He is going to lose all but one of the Gorgs, and so maybe it wasn't as effective as he would have hoped. Both of the Zerg players here are expanding. You definitely have to give Neblime the advantage in terms of worker counts, but at the same time, his army is a bit more inflexible. The fact that they move a little bit slower, that does open him up to a counterattack, and I wouldn't really be surprised if he's finding it going to find it very difficult to hold. He's gone all in on Gorgs. He has no Lakizilisks, and behind this is not an all-in for Mystery Meat, despite what you may suspect would have been better. This is a situation where he is drolling up, so he can start to to add workers to his expansion. I think he had a decent amount of money float or something going on anyway. So he's going to be able to spend most of his larva to make more workers, and behind that, he's just going to be using hydras. So pretty soon he's going to close the worker gap, and he also obviously does have the. I guess that was a mystery meat, Droleth, that was still in the vicinity. But yeah, this Hatrosk is only now getting set up. I think all of these Gorgs are just dead. I don't think that they can realistically fight against it. I'm not even sure they'd be able to fight against it if they were the old one that attacked a little bit faster, but it's quite possible. There's not really great focus fire coming down here, so I could just eat my words considering all of that. Yeah, it was a little bit awkward to click on them because they can stack up, but yeah, they will clean this up a little bit. And again, I think if the focus fire had been a little bit better on top of the spread, which is sometimes very, very difficult to accomplish, then Mystery Meat would have been able to be a little bit better about finishing the task, so to speak. That being said, Azoriustaleth is out. I don't know that that's going to be too significant, but of course there's going to be some defenses being put down here. If one Spraith and a whole host of Hydras can sort of guard this expansion, this Spraith was remorphed in the meantime, and there's at least one of these Gorgs that's very wounded. I don't know how much Neblime can really pivot over here. He's still, going strong, economically speaking. Here comes the Zorius. The Hydras are going to rally up forward and start to whittle it down. And yeah, you can see that the, wisely speaking, the Spraith is going to be the target here for Neblime. The Rokor spawned and will expire. It was not brought with him. Goodbye. Yeah, just more Gorgs. That's going to be the name of the game here. What does... Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that we don't see something like Skiths to really try to battle them with the micro battle, outrun them, etc. But, you know what? Mystery Meat wants to save his gas, maybe. Definitely has a decent amount of money here compared to his opponent, particularly with regards to gas. Hydra's standing guard. Not committing any more on defense. This Spraith is in a position, thanks to the edge of the map, where we cannot see the Gorg sneak by or anything without taking some damage. Oh yes, the map is Repulsion, by the way. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. This is actually an older version of it, so whoever's hosting these really needs to update their maps. It's a common issue. If they don't install CMBW into their maps folder, it does become a little bit hard to successfully keep your maps up to date. There's another fleet of Gorgs here. Neblime really trying to play this like it's the previous versions of the game. And so far, it's working out okay for him, but neither player is yet securing additional bases. And Neblime, he's got a worker advantage of 3, but obviously he's at a bit of a tech deficit as his opponent is starting to get Zorkas. So Mystery Meat will be able to field Gorgs of his own if that's what he wants to do, but it's actually going to be a Lekizalisk. I like this move because you can basically just call the bluff and just burrow Lekizalisks. If there's nothing here for detection, and there's only the one Zoriustaleth that's actually on the ground, then the Lekizalisks can just be sent off to the enemy's base, burrow, and then shut down your mining. Even if they don't get any kills because you're fast on the ball, that's still going to be enough. We also see some Izira in production. I don't mind that at all either because they will obviously... they won't necessarily peel for the Gorgs, but they'll be dealing somewhat consistent damage to all of them with the burst, like the bounce attacks and the multi-targets. And yes, here come the Ovaleths as well. At least one of them will go ahead and fly over. Although I think it's going to be spotted by some of these Gorgs that are flying around. If I had to guess, this last one here is going to be the one that sees it. So we'll see what the target is. But honestly, they're about the same in terms of, movement speeds. I'm not so sure that it's going to matter too much. Here comes the Zorius just, he's just scouting with it. No, I don't know if he meant to go there, but it's pretty amusing if he did. He's just going to go ahead and get the scout off. It's kind of like what Mesk has described before, saying that he likes to, when he's playing as Terran, he likes to just scout with fucking... like an Anseal, and that in the same way as the Zorius just scouting out, it's quite amusing. Obviously for ground units you can just block their path, so a bit of a fumble by Mist, but not something that's too significant here. So there is vision of this back area. Obviously the Lekizalisk could just maybe charge into the middle of the map over here. There is already an Ovaleth for detection, but it's crucially not at this position. So depending on what Mist wants to do, does he want to just elevate her in? He's actually going to charge forward, and we do see this very veritable stack of Gorgs. And this is one of the enemies to balancing, is that they obviously air units can just stack up like this. But, the Izira is again doing some consistent damage. There's some Gorgs of his own back here. So it looks like, unfortunately for our balance hopes, we are still seeing crowd control reign supreme. And, I'm not really sure I'm not really sure this is the wisest move, though. Like, I don't know how much pressure, realistically speaking, there is here. But here's the elevator for the Lakizilisks. Again, there's really nothing here. It doesn't even look like neblime was able to spot this, per se. He's only going to see it now. And this is going to shut down a lot of his mining, instantaneously mistakes a narrow worker count advantage, and also shuts down mining for a considerable amount of time. There's no Ovolith here. Okay, here comes the Ovolith. We'll see if the units are going to be... You know, they weren't spotted by the Ovolith here. So he's actually going to go ahead and burrow them closer. This is a little bit spooky. Yeah, this is going to get a decent amount of kills here. I think yeah, oh my goodness. He's trying to kill him with workers. It's actually going to be kind of successful, but oh man, at the very end there, taking so much damage. And yeah, okay, he's still able to remax his workers pretty efficiently, and he does have a third base up already. So it wasn't a total loss of mining time. It's quite funny how, like, there's this ocean of Gorgs, but... He doesn't want to risk attacking into Mist's stack either. And yeah, I think we probably would need to see a tier 2 or something for one of these players in order to really break the other. As far as the Gorg stacks go, otherwise you're just going to be seeing the slowest Gorg slap fight of all time. But that's just because they recently attacked slower. Now, they are going to be making a beeline for the top right here. This is, of course, the main. And there's way more Gorgs than Mist can reasonably deal with here. So he's going to go ahead and evacuate his workers. Now, once again, behind in terms of worker count. Here comes his stack. Remember, if neblime loses this, he's going to go ahead and pick off the Hydra then, it looks like. But if neblime loses this stack of Gorgs, which it seems quite likely that he will, this is going to be really bad. Now, Mist really fumbled the control there. Definitely could have been moving shot and tried to, like, organize it, but actually it's an attempt here by neblime. You can see a lot of his units are attacking the ones on the right, but they took so much damage, and I think he's going to lose all of his Gorger cores. At this stage, I don't know that he has what it takes to sort of hold back an attack if it instantaneously comes. It just doesn't look like that's something that the rubble in the ground. It doesn't look like that's something that Mist is too interested in doing. So, you know, old habits die hard. Gorger core spam in ZVZ is apparently just going to be a habitual thing for these players. But I gotta say that they both could have been much more efficient with other units, it feels like. Again, the Lakizilisk run-by, when there were only Gorgs and no Ovoliths, you could have just done that at any point. And now we see neblime finally starting to pivot out of that tech. He does have some Lakizilisks, but this Ovolith is going to be able to spot them. And the Hydras plus Izzies are not going to be too shabby about dealing with that. Again, if there were some moving shots or a little bit of stutter stepping there, I think that would have won the day versus this Gorger core, but that's not going to be too significant. You see this, all the circuits there. There's a time period where he can just walk in and step on the space. He's a little bit paranoid about the Lakizilisks, it seems, but he can definitely just attack into that. And there isn't a fleet of Gorgs elsewhere, right? There's almost no military units here for neblime. He's dwarfed by a third in terms of the military units of his opponent. And this is with, obviously, the Zorkas remaining here for Mystery Meat as he banks some more gas. He's harvesting only from gas from his third. He's clearly intending to tech up since he has an okay mineral economy anyway. And that means he's probably going to be using a lot of Izira cores in the meantime as far as unit production is concerned. He has 6 Gorgs on the way, 8 Gorgs actually, that have just hatched. So he can bring those with his attack force and maybe alongside an Ovolith just pick off the Lakizilisks that way as well as the Spraith, and then he can reign supreme over the base and like force an engagement. And again, okay, there's an Iral Iris here, but I don't think neblime is going... This is a very greedy play from neblime. The fact that he's going for a tech up in this state where he has so few military units, and the military units he does have are fairly committal, right? He doesn't have very generalist units. Like if he had all of the minerals and gas that he put into Lakizilisk, if he had all of those in Hydras, I would give him the fight here based on the static defense. But I don't think he's going to be able to do too much here. Obviously, the Izira cores are here, but some of these units are actually allowing him to splash onto Lakizilisks even without vision. Like that one in the back is almost dead already. And there it goes. So we're going to see this third base fall. It was not as efficient and clean as it could have been for Mist as far as taking it. He did sacrifice a couple of ground units and at least 1 or 2 Gorger cores a little bit needlessly, but either way, he's still able to come out ahead. Now he has a third base and his opponent doesn't. The one thing is, of course, that the tech is only now just starting for... So tier 2 is available and it's instantaneously swapped into for a Gorgrel Swamp. I couldn't see the Zorkas for a second. It was hiding underneath the Iral Iris. That being said, there's some units sort of like moseying on up. There's actually no defenses over here for ground. So the Izira cores can and will start to threaten this base a little bit. I mean, there's a couple of... No, there's no military units here. So this will at least force the Mystery to show his attack force. And yeah, he's going to go ahead and start tickling these workers. There's no anti-ground defense, anti-surface defense whatsoever. So here come the units. Obviously, the drill is in. He's not really gunning any kills, but again, the tempo here, I mean, he would have liked to get some worker kills, especially after losing his own third. He's now down by 24 workers. But at the same time, you know, the tempo is here, right? So the Gorgor Swamp is finished. Vithrilisks are going to be on the cards, but of course, first he's going to get some Bactyls. And yeah, the fact that he has the Skiths out, it pretty much signifies, hey, I'm going to go for Vithrilisks. I'm going to deal with the Gorgor cores that way. I think we're going to see the same thing. The Admiral Iris is finishing for Mist. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to instantaneously use that. Remember, one of the changes that happened in the last couple weeks is that when you finish your tech center, either as Zerg or as Terran, you get the what was previously used for upgrades. Evolution complete for Zerg, upgrade complete for Terran, those advisor lines. So as a player, you have a distinct knowledge of when you actually have access to this new tech. And that should allow them to be pretty consistent with how they like respond to that. Although we still see tech not really being utilized, so who knows? But in this particular game, it was pretty quick. You know, Gorgor Swamp instantaneously for Neblime. You know, fairly similar over here. Nobody using Quasrock or Leveril. Not just yet, anyway. It was a bit of a longer ZVZ than I was expecting, to be honest, and this is despite all of the Gorg silliness. I think air stacking realistically is one of the biggest enemies to balance at this stage of the game's development because, you know, we can't, like, I would just like air unit pathing and then it would instantaneously be much better. But anyway, the Vithrilisks are here. I think only 3 or 4 of them yet. So I'm not sure how many of them are going to be super useful here. But yeah, debuffing your own ground units on the same time is not going to be too hot. A lot of these are Tetzoricors, which are a little bit cheaper. And yeah, the eggs are obviously causing a big headache here. Here come the Hydras and Bactyls, so they all hatch. And they are in much bigger numbers, in fact, than the alternatives. The Bactylisks are doing a little bit of bounce damage, but GG is called the army is just way too damn big for Mist. And that's the risk of going for a tier 2, is that you didn't have any resources to spend on military units to guard that base. And so I think Neblime will look back at this and realize I probably was a little bit greedy with my tech. And as soon as you lose the third base, right, like you have to counterattack in kind. And he didn't have any units with which to do that because all of his military units pretty much were Lakizilisks, and I think like the 1 Ovaleth, 1 Gorgor Core, 2 Azura Cores. It's not going to be enough. So yeah, all right, we got an actual ZVZ out of that. That's not too bad. And of course, we'll continue to think about other things that we can do. I'm not going to make any balance changes off of this one game alone, of course. But if people find some interesting counters and such to the Gorgor Core meta, it definitely seems a lot more approachable now, then that's going to be already something worth writing home about. And let's check out the second game of this set in just a moment. Well, you know, boys, life is good. We got some more action here, and Mystery Meat has become Terran, and even says so. This is a convention I never really understood. Why people went random and then told you their race. Maybe Mystery Meat can comment below. Oh, by the way, Mystery Meat recently sent in $9 through Coffee saying that he needs the Mesk Advisor. Well, that sounds like a bounty to me. I have no idea if I'll be able to finish the advisor work and the tutorial stuff before I go out on my trip. But if you haven't guessed, I'm making sure we got content, at least for most of that. We'll see. You know, I don't know if I can backdate like 7 castovers or whatever, because I'll be gone for about a week. Maybe a little bit more, just in case I don't feel like going too ham. I suppose what could end up happening is Mesk does some castovers while I'm away, and I get them uploaded when I'm back or something like that. But who knows? I hope you guys have been enjoying the content. And if you like Mystery Meat, just cannot wait for the Mesk Advisor, well, you know where to send your 3s. That being said, we do have a quarry, so Mr. Meat's going to go ahead and get money back now that he's sent some to me. He's got to make sure to get that money. And, of course, I do appreciate all of that kind of financial support. He's even going to be doing a little bit of a cheeky move here by building a proxy stockade. So I think maybe the fact that it's a fast quarry and then you don't see a structure with the scout. I mean, this is still in the old version of Repulsion, by the way. But the fact that you're not seeing the scout or using the scout to see the tech and all that, the fast quarry might throw him off. He might think this is like a super economic build, and then he might be surprised and ambushed by the anchor strat. It's kind of interesting to see this, because if Mystery ends up rolling, like going as random in one of the tournaments or something, I could see him as Terran pulling the strat off. You know, he's got a little bit unfortunate with the way that the Mason finished the job there, but he can go ahead and drop an anchor anytime as soon as he gets a little bit more cash. He's actually going to be cutting workers to do this, but you know, he's keeping pace with his opponent so far, and he definitely has economics behind this, right? So he's going to go ahead and get some more Mavericks, some more Masons, of course, and it will be a Gorgocore out, but I think the Anchor should finish before the Gorgocore finishes, and that means that it should... Oh, wait, hold on. What's he doing here? Did he... I don't think he saw anything down here, but I think he suspects. You know, he's like clearly looking for proxies. He's actually going to go ahead and see if he can expand out to the top left. I don't know what that draw left movement was, but so here we go. We got a Mason and 3 Mavericks in that Anchor. So one of them is for repairs. The Stockade here, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's going to land and make some more units in the meantime. It's not a bad strategy, actually. He's not able to block it, but he is able to start getting some attacks done immediately. And really what you want to do here is just take as little damage as possible. Thankfully, the Gorgocore there does take aggro, and you can't yet use the attack order. And there go all of the Mavericks pretty much before much can be done. Another Maverick does finish, but it's not going to really be able to do too much here. So he's just going to go ahead and get a scout. He does confirm a Lekizalisk. Okay, just barely. And now I guess the Gorgocore can just lay into the Stockade. There's not really much you can do back here since there's a Watchdog already in play. Now, Neblime does need to spend a lot of money on other things. 2 of his 16 workers are off in the distance, and one of them is about to turn into a Hatcherosk. So he's going to go ahead and recall those ones from the satellite bases and just take us natural, which is an apt move here. And with his single, I guess his Lekizalisk is still in here. Yeah, his Gorgocore is just going to be sat here doing some damage. There's some interesting pathing happening over here. So, yeah, okay, there you go. It's a little bit more consistent now. I think the Stockade will actually live, and what is he doing? He's doing something weird with it. He just selected it and then fucked around with it, but I don't know. I think this is also just like some wacky behavior with how units work that way. Unless he was actually ordering it and maybe we just didn't see it with the selection preview. Sometimes the selection preview doesn't actually update, which is a bit strange. Definitely some strange things that happen there. Anyhow, this Mason is just here to scout ahead. The Watchdog will keep him relatively safe. And a treasury is being started, so at least this Mason can get tickled. Not really a whole lot else going on here. He can get that. Oh, he doesn't want to stick to get that one. So the third Stockade does end up... The prodigal son returns away from his heathen deeds of proxying. And yeah, okay, instantaneously up to a 3rd base here for Neblime. He's going to go the macro sun, so he doesn't think that there's going to be... He scouts the treasury being made. He scouts the Cyprians coming out. He knows that Mystery Meat is going to settle in for a macro game. And he can still borrow this Lekizalisk and maybe like force Mystery Meat away from the ramp. And at that point, like, what can you really do? If you borrow the Lekizalisk on unbuildable terrain, they can't force it up with any sort of building, liftoff, and landing shenanigans. So, which is kind of funny to me that that's like an actual strategy that you can do to fend off. But only if you're Terran. There is a star pet on the way, though, so obviously an Anseal will just help him get rid of that. But even still, the treasury is done now. At any point, it could come down here. And again, like, the Lekizalisk is going to stop this from really doing too much here. He's taking a lot of unnecessary damage on the Gorgocore, though, and that could be consequential. But yeah, that immediately zones him off, and yeah, he's not really going to be able to do too much here with the treasury. Not until the star pet comes out and the Anseal is here, unless he wants to risk actually taking some damage. Now, if Neblime is unlucky, that is going to force the unburrow, and it does not, which actually is going to go ahead and kill one of the Mavericks and deal a decent amount of damage to other things. No, one of the Cyprians got aggroed to that Lekizalisk. A mistake from Neblime allows his units to end up getting absolutely slain. The Anseal's not in production yet. Actually, there's no gas here for Mystery just yet. He's been pumping Cyprian. So he's actually not going to be able to use that base for quite a while. Meanwhile, there's obviously, you know, the 3rd base up, Neblime doing his best to handle this as he's continuing to micro. And again, he can just lay here and deal some damage. Get a little bit of mileage out of that. Now, finally, we are going to see an Anseal. The Leapfrog is in. Yeah, he takes some damage, but that'll repair over time, right? Because of the way that the Lekizalisks work. And Zerg units work in general when burrowed. So, yeah, this treasury has not paid for itself just yet. It's really been delayed in terms of what it can actually do. I'm not sure that the Lekizalisk has enough vision to still attack that. But in any event, you know, obviously vision updates pretty slowly in Brood War. That's something that we do want to fix at some point. These damaged Cyprians being repaired, and the Anseal is finally here. With a cliff advantage, these Cyprians should be able to, if they move a little bit closer, they should be able to attack this. But there's also the anchors. And so, yeah, Neblime wisely just walks away and says, hey, I'll take my 4 kills and my incredible amount of stalling and walk that all the way back to the bank with them. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, this is going okay for neblime after the early game losing a decent amount of workers. He's bounced back quite nicely. And that goes back to show you, it's just like once you diffuse the early aggression, a lot of the times your opponent, you might not be able to kill your opponent, but your opponent can't really do too much to continue any sort of aggression. So you can contain them, you can do things on the map. This is a nice little textbook case of that. Now, another thing to keep in mind versus Terran is that when you see a Starpad or a Starpad unit like an Antseal, you really want to go for an Ovaleth just so that you can deny perpetual scouting. There are, well-placed Spraiths in all of these bases, so it doesn't seem to me like there can really be anything that can be done with these Wraiths. And there was a second one in production, as well as obviously an Ahmed drop that we're seeing foment. Hurricanes obviously are very lethal in that context. There's a Lakizalisk in this base, a Circuit over here. Actually, there's a Lakizalisk and a Circuit in all of the bases. So I still think 8 Hurricanes can do a lot of damage, and maybe even if they drop on the Lakizalisk, which would be kind of like a lucky guess for Mystery Meat, then they could potentially do a good amount of damage. And it really also depends on like how many are going to be put together here. This is really funny. I swear I didn't take this from Myst. The whole like stockade into Ahmed spam into like Starpad building Trojans. That was obviously featured in a Benno match where I played against Benno earlier. Yeah, I swear I didn't take that from that, but it's still pretty funny. Now the Ovaleth is over here. It does spy the Wraiths. I'm not sure if he paid too much attention here. And yeah, he's actually going to chase them down, and he's going to zone them away using the Ovaleth there. So at the very least, there's not really anything you can use to catch them if you don't have skits or naths. But obviously we don't see either of those out. And it's going to be a double drop, it looks like. Very interesting from Myst. He's trying to maybe attack multiple bases at once. But again, there's like pretty good coverage of defenses in a bunch of different places. It's almost like maybe neblime has been attacked by this before. So interesting stuff here. I think they've played a decent number of games against each other. At least a couple so that he can respond to that. Now this Gorgakor, I don't know if it spotted the drop or not, but the attack is on the way. So that's kind of interesting. There's a couple of infantry units on their way to, it looks like over off to the bottom middle. And again, this being an older version of the map, this doesn't have the changes to that third base to make this a high ground. So it's a little bit easier to get ambushed here as you're trying to set things up. We're going to keep an eye on these Trojans as the Wraiths continue to rescout, try to figure out where enemy units are. See a couple of idle units in the meantime. And yeah, what's going to happen? Neblime's nearly there on the tech up, so he's going to go ahead and do that. That could be a prime target if the Trojans come in at exactly that moment, and I think they probably will. The Iral Iris did just go down. It's a question of, how soon does that happen? Now, they choose to drop back here, and yeah, there goes the burrow. Obviously, the Antseal is here to detect, so that's not really going to help you out too much. And yeah, the fact that the Antseal was here to detect kills the Lakizalisk dead. Now the Iral Iris being targeted, again, a very prime target here, and it will be killed. Well, it'll at least be canceled, so he gets some of the money back. That's obviously a huge investment otherwise. But yeah, here come the Iziracors. They're a little bit awkward with their pathing. I don't know what happened there. They could have killed a couple more Hurricanes, and he's actually recalled the entire army to try to deal with this, which is really quite desperate. I mean, he could have... It looks like maybe he denied this base in the bottom middle or something because the attempt at taking that base in the bottom middle. But yeah, the fact that the whole army had to come back over here, that's pretty rough. And Ahmed might even get a couple of worker kills on the way out. Looks like maybe not. But yeah, evacuating with both Trojans alive, the Antseal somehow alive, like the damage spread on that, the Spraith wasn't really super well put together. And the tier 2 is now complete for the... oh, he's actually canceling his Fulcrums. The tier 2 is complete for the Terran player here, and it's going to be captaincies instead of Fulcrums. So not interested in Madrigals or... third base is where you build your tech. Okay, that's a little bit spooky. I was looking for where the gas went. But yeah, the... okay, well, we've spotted that. And we see, again, just captaincy spams are coming out. Hurricanes, Mavericks, you name it. It's going to be bio all the way. Repairs coming in for the various units over here that were responsible for that drop. And Ministry over here for a third base, as well as the stockade floating, or the anchor floating, rather. So this is going to give some intel to neblime, who's actually covering every single base with an Iziracor. So that's not too bad. He's going to recall all of those units. He's just confirming where his opponent actually is. And this Gorgakor will go ahead and see that a Ministry's been constructed. So this one will actually fly over here, it looks like. So that's kind of interesting as far as a tempo play is concerned by Mist. He wants to just build that. And I think players have started to realize, okay, the treasuries are too vulnerable in the mid-game. Maybe ministries are the way to go, at the very least for these bases that are up front. Like maybe if the map was designed a bit differently, if you were on a map where you could expand in a more safer location, it would make a bit more sense. So it's going to be Fountainhead. I have heard tells that Mist appreciates the Tinkerer's Tower, and that is something that you get out of the Fountainhead. So either that, it's going to be maybe like mantles alongside that or something, who knows. But yeah, at this stage, he's actually pulling his units away, leaving this ministry undefended from the right-hand side. He doesn't really have any map knowledge, actually. Neblime used to have a lot of good map knowledge as far as like the expansions are concerned. But at this point, he recalled all of his units to consolidate them, and he can just walk in here and storm the gates and maybe pick off a lot of the Masons. It really depends on when he pulls the trigger. We could see him sending a worker over there almost certainly, or maybe rallying a worker for the purposes of building a base there. Getting a Muthrock Spire in his natural and upgrading his Hydrock into a Gorgrel. That's in his main, of course. His units are doing a little bit of a jig over here while they wait their call. And more Lachezelisks being burrowed in each base. There's only one here, but there's also an upgraded Scorch Wraith. There's no anti-air, unfortunately, so... well, I say unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be tested. Some Zorius the Leths are going to be probably catching this army move out and maybe even faking out the position. Yeah, I think the Zorius going over here alongside the Gorger Corps, just harassing the base, is going to pull the military over here. We already see some Madcaps out. Some of the Masons engaging. There goes the Gorg. But yeah, at this stage, you've scouted out the army. He knows he can just go ahead and charge in. The Bactylisks are just about done, and the Azira Corps will lead the charge. Only 2 Cyprians here. Obviously, Azira Corps now block the shots there, so they will easily start harassing a lot of these bases, a lot of these units. And the Bactylisks are here as well to deal with any repairmen. So yeah, at this stage, okay, suddenly Mystery Meat is in a really awkward position. He doesn't even finish clearing out this area, so unfortunately for him, he's going to have to go ahead and fix that. And he's just going to go ahead and concede this base as a result. He can't really get into a good position to deal with that. Bounce damage does handle the anchor quite nicely. And another base being taken here. Going up to 4 bases is Neblime. Full saturation on this one. There was an attempted Ahmed drop, it looks like, or just an Ahmed attack. We can see the brutal aftermath of that. It was absolutely eviscerated, although he might have spotted the tech, so that could be an important discovery for later. Now here's the Bio Ball, but the Bactylisks, again, they are in a really good spot, and the wounded Zoriustalets allow the Azira Corps to get there a lot faster as well. That totally cleans up the army, and there's almost nothing that can be done about it. Strigas are out, but again, they do need to actually get on top of the enemy, and this Anseal is almost certainly dead. A couple of Hurricanes were left in that base, and yeah, this one's now going to be threatened. So all the Masons are going to go down, almost certainly. Strigas are out. Tinkerer's Towers indeed. I don't know that either of the units from the Tinkerer's Tower are going to be super useful against this, just because of the fact that they get slapped. But, 4 armor is nothing to scoff at. So maybe the Strigas could work out pretty well. It's just they have no backbone here. They're not tanking for anything. So that's really the biggest problem here. We do have a vestry, but it's going to be GG called. They're just, even though there was plenty of money, there wasn't enough behind it. There were no extra Cyprians or anything to go behind that army to really soak up some more damage or do more damage while the Strigas were soaking up. I think we saw a little bit of a flash of what the Strigas could have been if they had been used in conjunction with the main army, but they just weren't ready yet. He caught him in the middle of a tech transition, and pretty good play coming out of Neblime. So the series is tied up 1-1, and unfortunately, there was a third game played, but it did have some hashes, so we're going to just investigate that off the castover play. But if you guys want to see a proper best-of-3 between these two players, I certainly do. Of course, leave a comment below saying as much. I think Neblime emerging as a player that can... Mystery Meat won championships. Multiple Ascension tournaments were won by him by simply taking Terran, and Neblime defeated him on a macro map. So I think that kind of tells you, hey, maybe these guys know what they're doing. Maybe these guys are, experimenting a little bit, right? And Mystery Me going for something that he didn't usually go for. He didn't go for the tried and true, phalanxes for holding off enemies. He wanted a more aggressive approach. And maybe it could have worked if the Strigas had come out a bit earlier. But either way, what we're seeing here is something to be remembered, I think. So Neblime can take this historic victory. He might have even taken games off of Mystery before. I don't know. I'm not privy to that information. But for us, Neblime gets on the board versus a very worthy opponent, and I'll just be seeing you tomorrow for another castover.